Welcome back to the Business That Matters Spotlight. This is Warren Coughlin. And, one of the things I love about this podcast is seeing the wide array of ways that people strive to make a difference. Some choose products or services that make some change. Some focus on the impact they have on their people. Some choose processes or supply chains to create impacts in otherwise traditional businesses. And yet others, they provide traditional services but choose to focus on who they deliver those services to, like the shovel vendors in the gold rush. These people make possible the good work that others do. And it's a great approach because it's really highly leveraged. One business can impact the success of many others in their efforts to multiply their impacts. And today's guest is one of those good souls. David Billson is the founder of Our Traction. They provide a large mix of marketing and technical and branding services specifically for nonprofits and charities. And he's been doing that for over 23 years before all the cool kids got into the game. He's also one of the co-founders of a great initiative called RH Ventures that I hope we'll get to hear more about. But his is also a story of perseverance and overcoming some challenging times without sacrificing one's values or principles. So I've been looking forward to this. David, welcome to the Spotlight.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Listen, on the Spotlight, what we always do is ask our guests to give one tip for the audience, just in case they can't stick around for the whole podcast. So if you were to share with somebody one tip for somebody who wants to make an impact with their business, what would you offer?
I think the basic thing is just actually measuring what your impact is. I mean, it sounds maybe a little bit intuitive, but the B Corp community has an amazing tool, whether or not you want to be a B Corp or not, called the Impact Assessment. And it was really eye-opening the first time I went through that as a business owner. I considered myself, an impact business, a social purpose business, but it really wasn't until I went through the Impact Assessment that I started to realize some of the things that we could do better, and even some of the stuff around. We had informal policies that just making those formal policies so that they would, continue on as the company grew, and the owners weren't in direct touch with the employees. So going through that process really forced a lot of discipline on our organization, from both, what is your impact model to, how are you actually treating your employees in an ethical way? And are there some things, in your hunt for points, I guess, that you can realize that you can do better. So I think, anyone who wants to have an impact, just starting in having a good calibration for what is your impact and how are you making that? And then that gives you the tool set also to figure out how you're going to grow that impact.
Nice. Now, do they have specific metrics they want you to measure, or is it just that you have to come up with some metrics? Because there's thousands of ways of having impact.
Yeah, both. Some of the questions are a little bit more self-directed, I guess, in that you have a goal to say increase your diversity. In other cases, they'll have hard targets for what that score is worth. But I think, to qualify to be a B Corp, you have to score above 80. Our company scores around 100 each time we recertify. So there's still a lot of points, on the table that you could grow into. So, but some of it is just, do you have a policy for social purchasing guidelines, for example? But it doesn't say specifically how much of that you have to do.
Right. And so have you created particular metrics of your own that you measure that aren't part of the B Corp metrics?
I think most of ours are probably incorporated with the B Corp metrics. At least I can't think of any that jump off the top of my head. But things like average tenure matter. Things like, are you a living wage employer? What percentage of your employees make a living wage? Those things matter. How much percentage of a bonus you give your employees over their base salary. Things like that. That we track. Obviously, just feed into the score. And things like our customer count and what customers have an impact. So as you mentioned in the opening, we focus a lot on social organizations like social enterprises, nonprofits, charities. And so understanding what percentage of our book of business is impact related helps our score, but is also something we track as an internal metric as well.
Nice. It's often a hard thing to do. I was on the board years ago, something called Street Kids International, and we provided entrepreneurial training to street youth in developing countries. And measuring impact with that is really hard when you think about it. In Kathmandu, finding the person who lived on the street, who went through a training program, and finding out where they wound up and what they're actually doing now and whether it's been an impact. It's not like there's a lot of electronic infrastructure and human resources following street kids around as to where they wind up. So measuring impact can be super challenging.
It certainly is. And, I think, again, with the B Corp community, they've done a good job on tracking even some of the initiatives towards the UN SDGs and some of the metrics under the sustainability goals and guidelines. And they have a separate tool. I haven't really played too much with it, but there's a UN sustainability goal tracking if you want to set yourself to be, on a collective impact model. And, so I guess to that point, measuring what matters to you, your impact, what you want your business to do is probably, I wouldn't worry too much, especially if you're starting out, what the B Corp community says is important. But the reason I suggest it as a tool is it gives you some framework to start thinking about it and how you're going to measure it. Because, there's the old idiom, what gets measured gets done. And that, as you grow your business, there is going to be tension around, profit goals, social impact, human impact, employee stakeholder, tension. Do you pay your employees more? Do you charge your customers more? All of those fun things, kind of get mixed in. And without that, I guess, stake in the ground that kind of says, this is where impact is, this is what we want to do, and this is how we want to show up. It's really easy to drift from the social purpose impact business into more traditional business, where, you're chasing money and you're chasing revenue for growth. I always kind of say growth without purpose is kind of cancer. That's really how, cancer grows. Right. So I think an organization that's growing without purpose, it's just growing for the sake of growth is, I use that as an oh God, I can't say the word. The same as cancer. But, for me, that's why it's important to kind of anchor that, because if you start growing, there's just in the forces and tides of business, there's a constant pressure for growth, both internally and externally. And if you don't really put that purpose at the center of what you're doing, it's really easy to fall into non-ethical business practices.
And that's, for the clients you work with, that's even true in the nonprofit sector too.
100%.
There's just growth for the sake of growth because we're supposed to. So we better go get more funding dollars and take funding dollars again away from somebody who does the same thing as us.
Yep. And I think there's also, you get into employee exploitation a little bit, where employees are underpaid for the work that they do because they care so much and passionately about what the organization is doing. So, I think all of the sectors have different risk profiles in exploiting their stakeholders.
Right. Now, so you started this 23 years ago. So starting a business when you were like 12, I guess is.
Yeah, something like it. No, it's 20, 22, 23, somewhere in there.
Yeah. And so what got you started? So that's like that long. It wasn't a normal thing then
no, certainly not
at that time to start a social impact business. Like what was the impetus?
The impetus was actually working for a larger company, and we had a satellite office here in London, Ontario. At one point, it was up to 30 staff during sort of the .com boom eras of the late 90s, early 2000. And we ended up with that company not doing well and doing successive layoffs, and ultimately came down to had a team of about 4 or 5 folks left here in London, and felt very strongly that we had a good business model here, in the city, and basically kind of gave an ultimatum to the organization that was running. Either we're all out together or we're staying together. And that caught the interest of one of the investors. It's a long story. We don't have to go to the rabbit hole, called V Traction, which is actually where our traction inherits its name. And working with V Traction, we actually bought the London office out of that larger company. And we were, more or less correct that we had the business fundamentals right with our London office. The challenge that we ran into was the just tech recession of 2001. You had the Y2K bug. Everyone kind of spent their budgets then, and then you had the recession and the market collapse in, I think, April of 2000. So it wasn't a great time to start a tech business, but at the end of the day, I really felt I had a great team, and I felt the most important thing you can do in any business is have a strong team. And I really wanted the team to stay together, and that was the impetus. I, was a software developer previous. I was a lead developer and really had no business starting a business, I guess, other than I just really wanted to focus on keeping the team together. And 20 odd years later, some of that core team's still around. So.
And when you started that business, was it a social impact oriented business, or was it a traditional marketing business?
It wasn't. That's when I was talking about the intention. I tell a little bit of a story. During that time of the 2000 tech boom and bust and layoffs and all this stuff that happened, there was a sort of an infamous Christmas party that happened, and the owners of the company had done a previous transaction about 6 to 9 months ago that they were just now getting their checks for. Everything had kind of cleared, the legal process. So the founders of the company were in a fantastic mood because they got 6, maybe 7-figure checks. But the reality on the ground was a lot of our employees had just been laid off, and our team was sort of decimated. So there's I think it was December 17th or something for that. It's funny how 25 years later, events can kind of stick in your brain. But we're all sitting around the table, and just the dichotomy of the success of the owners and how happy they were, and clearly over the moon with their financial results, and the fact that the employees were on the ground, like suffering and losing their jobs, a week before Christmas. This is nuts. So, you can't, this business should not be run this way. So from day one, I always felt, I have the words now, but it was really a multi-stakeholder, operation from day one. We incorporated things like profit sharing from day one, so that, if the company did well and the founders of the company did well, so too would the employees.
Mm. And was that like a learned experience just through that, or did you always have kind of an idealistic perspective on business?
I think I just always had that sort of idealistic business. My parents were both teachers, and my dad was a union individual. And, I remember at one point, my dad would sometimes go on strike with the union, and he would talk about how the family realistically wouldn't make the money back, with how many years he had left to work with their raise. But he genuinely felt like he was doing the strike for the next generation of teachers coming up. And he said the reason that he did that was because the previous generation before him stood up and protected his rights. And so I guess I was raised with a worker balanced upbringing. I think, my parents and the values that they instilled get a lot of credit for that. And then just frankly seeing, the short-term gains, long-term pain that businesses inflict on themselves. I think when they make poor decisions ethically in the short term, you can maximize profit over a quarter or maybe over a year. But eventually, if you're exploiting customers, if you're exploiting workers, I truly believe that those things come back to bite you. And I saw that in 2 different organizations I'd worked for previously. So when I started my own, I thought, let's try to do things differently. Let's see if we can, operate in a way that we treat our customers and our employees and our owners and the community and the environment all as important pieces of our business. We've always been huge supporters of our community, and I felt that our community supported us through the years. You mentioned there's been ups and downs, and we wouldn't be here without our community supporting us when times were tough. And so I think that long-term view has really helped the organization as well. And some of that was just, seeing it done the opposite way and going, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah, sometimes you define yourself against the thing you don't like.
Absolutely, yeah.
So just we're talking around the business a little bit. What does the business actually do, and who are the types of or organizations specifically? Yeah,
so we work a lot, as you mentioned, with nonprofits and charities, specifically in the digital media marketing realm. So that can be anything from your branding, logo design, core messaging, key messaging, strategic messaging, all the way through the practical elements of building a website, and finally how we get people to find out about your brand through digital marketing, so social media, ad placement, digital ad placement, that kind of thing. So pretty much anything digital in the marketing realm, and then some custom software development pieces as well. So our background is in software development. That the 2 co-founders, really started their career in software. So we also have strong software. So that's what makes us a little different than a lot of marketing agencies. Is we're technical is a little bit stronger than you find in a typical marketing agency.
Right. And so, and when you say charities and nonprofits, that's a pretty big swath too. That's everything from heart and stroke all the way down to an information post business. So who do you actually is there any qualifying criteria for the types of organizations you work with?
Yeah, we found we typically work with the best, with like a $5 million plus budget. But then, we don't know like exactly where the cap is, but probably around a, $50 million a year annual budget. In nonprofits and charities, it really depends on how much of that is, government grant specific versus, the funds that they can direct.
And by that, you mean operating budget, not
operating budget. Yeah. So 5 million is kind of our sweet spot, where they typically have somebody in charge of marketing, but not a marketing department. So we can kind of augment the existing, staff team and really help out. The smaller nonprofits and charities we do, quite a bit of work with, but that typically they, can't always find the budget to work with our team. And so that's where, that $5 million is the sweet spot.
And is the work you do for them mostly around fundraising, or is it around, marketing particular initiatives?
It's a mix of, I would say, three things. One is exactly that, fundraising, how we get more revenue for the organization. Second piece is the revenue on the for things like events and marketing. Some of them have social enterprises. So one of our clients actually runs a store, kind of like a thrift store. So marketing and, promoting the things going on at the stores. And then last but not least, I would capture it under either HR or efficiency. So HR actually drives a lot of website demand I found in my career, because, if you're trying to recruit people to work for your company, if your website doesn't look good, it just doesn't reflect well on potential candidates. So that, in that operational efficiency piece, sometimes we'll even just help with, workflows. So one of our larger clients is Science North up in Sudbury, and their process on integrating their website to their ticket management software and making that a seamless user experience is technically difficult. It looks easy now, but that was quite a bit of work. So things like that, where we can use our technology skill sets to help with efficiencies. That's kind of those three main pillars.
I don't want to go heavy into COVID based stuff, because a lot of us are past that. But in the market you're working with, I only raise it because there's like two time frames. There was the COVID period where everyone stayed home, and then now we're in a tightening economy.
Yeah.
How is that? How are the organizations you're dealing with thriving, surviving, struggling in these times? Or are times actually better than maybe someone like me from the outside would perceive them to be for those organizations?
It's definitely a tough market right now for a lot of that sector. I think in COVID, a lot of organizations require, their funding is based on gala events or the big gala fundraisers. So those obviously went away during COVID. They pivoted. Some did digital, some did, online, some just kind of managed through it, manage their cash flow. Now what we're seeing is both at the provincial and the local municipal level here, we'll see what happens with federal, but a lot of budget constraints, tightening down. I think the government put out a lot of cash. We can debate the political merits of that or not, but at the end of the day, some of the cash is starting to go back. So, the federal government, with the CEBA loans, business owners having to repay that. I can speak to that personally. That was not fun, but that also a lot of the nonprofits and charities were eligible for that as well. And so, you have $40,000 of cash flow taken out of a lot of organizations. So things are a lot tighter this year. Normally March is a pretty hectic sales month for us. It's kind of the nonprofits and charities wrap up their year-end budgets. This year's quiet compared to the last two.
Mm. And I sort of offered the opportunity to talk about that a little bit, because I think people who normally like to give to charities and stuff may not always be aware of the tough circumstances they're in. And
it's
so
tough
if you are in a position to help out, this is actually a really good year to maybe, if you've got the resources, to dig in a little extra and share, because those organizations are struggling.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I can speak to, 3 or 4 organizations that are really key to the fabric of the city here that are not getting municipal funding, that have gotten it, for the past, say, 5-10 years. And I suspect, I don't know about other municipalities, but it would not shock me to find that that's happening in other areas. I do think government spending in this area is going to reduce for a while, as we kind of recover from the spend from COVID. And, yeah, so absolutely, the sector needs all hands on deck. There's a lot of great impact that they do. The work that they do is work that is sometimes thankless and sometimes even invisible that we don't realize that these nonprofits and charities are doing to help youth, help people in disadvantaged circumstances. That I think as those organizations, if they fade away or reduce their impact, we're going to start to see and realize, oh, that's what that organization was doing.
Right. And can you talk just really briefly, because again, I've served on several boards, and one of the things that always comes up, and I don't think donors understand this enough, everyone wants to feel really good about how they're giving to that specific initiative that's helping those people. But charities can't, organizations, nonprofits, they can't exist without core funding. And some people always wanting their donations tied to a particular project, often, from my understanding, like handcuffs a lot of organizations doing what they want. So can you talk just a little bit about that between like core funding versus project funding?
Yeah, I think it's again, if you serve on a board or you have experience, you can kind of see behind the curtain a little bit. But exactly what you said, a lot of people, who wants to donate to a nonprofit or charity to pay for the accountant's position. It's just not very exciting. But without that accountant, that nonprofit can't do their work in community. So with when we donate to specific causes within a nonprofit or charity, we're often handcuffing the organization's ability to even deploy that capital properly. So I typically do my donations to the general pool, and I believe it. For me, if it's an organization that I have the want to support, I kind of leave it up to them to put the best impact forward. Now, obviously, if you have a specific disease or a specific thing that a family member suffered for and you want to fund that, then please go ahead and do so. But to the extent possible, I think the more we can let organizations have discretionary funding, the better they are able to make just decisions on where the money should go versus a specific program. One of the challenges I've seen is that they have this money for programs, but they actually don't have the resources to deploy those funds. So that
I agree with that. That's how I on my giving as well. Just like you guys figure it out. I'm not the expert.
Absolutely. That's something we really focused on with our agency. Even some of our we used to be a little bit more on the social activism side of things with our business, but we decided a few years ago that we're not experts in what's going on in different world economies or what's happening in different social circumstances with homelessness and things like that. So what we decided to do is amplify the voices of the experts in our community that are experts on that, and try to support them. And that's a little bit, I guess, ego check for me, because I like to think that I have really good opinions on everything. But really just that there's so many great organizations, in any community that are working on, the tough problems of, homelessness, mental health, addictions, that, to whatever extent we can as a community to support them. And my spidey sense is that the impact of homelessness, the impact of wealth inequity, and the impact of addictions is going to continue to impact. I don't know, where you're living right now, but downtown London, is definitely seeing some challenges with homelessness and the impact on commerce down there. And to the extent that we can help those people get lives back on track, get off the street, sheltered and food in their bellies, that makes it the win-win for the city, is that it's a little more livable city for those of us that are in more fortunate circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of attention being paid to that. Now, back to your business. Mm-hmm. So you and I had a little bit of a conversation before. You said you went through a bit of a transition where for a while there, it was all about the cause, and then you kind of bumped up against some business realities and had to learn some business chops, right? Can you just
I think
about how that evolution went?
Part of it comes from just being it's starting the business. I think 24. I think you do the math, 23, 24. But it was really in the early days very much gung ho on growth. Because that allowed us to grow the impact of the organization. A little bit of ego as well, being at one point we were the largest technology employer in the city and all that sort of fun stuff. So I will acknowledge, a lot of it was ego driven, but a lot of it was, every dollar that we pumped in, was pumped into the organization. We pumped back out to either social causes or into hiring people without really the proper focus on just frankly profitability. Like what's the return to the business, and how are we creating a sustainable organization. So for 20-ish years, I think I was amazing at running a break-even company, or even a company that was losing money, but was able to sort of cash flow through those periods. And started, I think the gong maybe hit when I turned 40, and I realized eventually I kind of need to retire. So and not having had a lot of successful financial years, I guess, from a profitability perspective, I've done okay, but I certainly don't have any sort of nest egg, or my CPP contributions were limited, as a lot of business owners are. And so started really thinking about, well, what's the I don't necessarily want to be a Walmart greeter. Not there's anything wrong with that, but if I choose to do that, I want it to be a choice because I miss people, not because I need to put food on my table. And really started thinking, this, I have to start looking at this as a return on investment. I've put 20 years of blood, sweat, and tears into it, and now I really need to start seeing that turn into something that can be something you can either I can sell to either transition to existing employees, succession plan, sell to another organization, or frankly live off the cash flows sufficiently enough. And that really led me to focus the business on recurring revenue, recurring repeat business, which kind of lended well actually into the segment, the customer segment that we're focusing on, and really just. How to say, growing up, I guess, maturing and saying, no, this is going to be a business first, and impact not second, but we can't sacrifice the underlying business fundamentals for impact, because then we don't have any impact anymore because we're at a business. And having probably 3 really close calls with that over 20 years, you start to realize that is a reality. There's a statistic out there from BDC. They have a tool you can go on and see, for your type of company in your industry, what your likelihood of going into business in a year is, and mine's been 42%. So, every year you're waking up and you've got a 42% chance of making it in our industry, in our sector. Now, it's not to say that they go out of business for negative reasons, but could be retirement, could be whatever. But 42% of my type of business won't will make it next year. 60% won't be around, which is sort of a sobering thought. So you start to really think about it's a little selfish, I guess, but what is this? How is this going to get me to my retirement? But through that, we've actually increased the amount of profit sharing that we pay to our employees, because our focus on profitability means that we have profit to share with our employees. We focus on efficiency and have some incentive plans, along that we pay out a bonus to our staff if there's efficiency gains on top of the profit sharing. So what's kind of funny, and this is I think true pretty much across my experience with the social impact side, is when you do things the right way with an ethical lens, it ends up being good for business and good for people. So again, our employees are getting paid more because I had a panic moment and realized that I'm not going to be able to retire. I'm starting to creep up on 50, and I don't have a plan, and nobody wants to hire a 55-year-old old entrepreneur, right? So if the business isn't going to make it, I better at least have some sort of a nest egg. But as I said, the employees have won. We created some innovative ways of doing our pricing models for our customers, and it's been a win for them. So honestly, just focusing on the business, but doing it ethically is, as I said, it's a win-win-win. So I wish I had done it sooner.
It's actually one of those exercises in creativity. One of the theories of creativity, you're probably familiar with this being in the space you're in, but constraints actually foster
creativity. 100%.
So to say, hey, we need to make money, but we have to do it within these guidelines. You have to come up with things like new business models, new pricing models, new service offerings, new compensation incentives, and things like that. And if you engage your team in it, it can actually be a really exciting.
Oh yeah, no, it was amazing, and I have to credit my team with a lot of creativity over the past, again, 4 or 5 years. In the COVID era, that forced some change. But as I said, we focused our business model on repeat business and recurring revenue, and right now about 65-70% of our expenses are covered by our recurring revenue. Whereas 5 years ago, that would have been maybe like 5%. So when we have a tough sales month like March, it's been okay, but normally March is really strong. We're not panicking because it's really that 30% gap we have to make up versus 70%. But if you go back 5 years ago, if we had a tough sales month, that's 100% of our revenue that we don't have, covered in April. So we just have to figure out a way to get 30% more in April versus 100. And that's made a huge difference in our business.
Now, I want to poke at you on one thing you said, because just people even listening, I just want to, I'm going to get on a soapbox for a second. But when you said, maybe it's selfish that I want to do this, retire, and this kind of thing. One of the philosophies I have on this that I try to inculcate a little bit is, if you are a participant in a free enterprise system, in a market economy, the theory of the market economy is that it's an exchange of value. You're providing value, you receive value. And I believe very passionately that businesses like yours that not only provide a service, but that also have social impact, are creating more value. And therefore, the entrepreneurs who are driving those businesses should be extracting, or should be not necessarily extracting, but be receiving more value. And it's sometimes the reverse. People think, well, because I'm socially motivated, I should be making less money. And I want people to be thinking, no, you should be making more. Now, what you do with that money is your choice. You can plow it back into social initiatives or whatever you want.
Yep. That's the key takeaway, is what are you doing with the funds, after the fact?
Yeah. So you don't have to be making yourself rich, but that notion that it's selfish for me to want to make sure that I have a retirement income when I have dedicated my life to employing people, giving them fair wages, giving them good quality work, and having good social impacts for those I serve, I don't think that's selfish.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. For me, it's, I look at 20 plus years, was usually the lowest paid employee, or one of the lowest paid employees kind of for a lot of that time. And, I think last year, a couple of years ago, was maybe one of the first times that I was, maybe top of the charts, for employment, or number two. I usually try to make sure that the salesperson's the best paid person in the company, because I don't like doing sales. So to whatever extent I can maximize that. But, in all seriousness, for me, it is a tough, it's a little bit of an ego, battle of wills. But as I said, the clock was my ally in this case. But definitely, the key point that you made was what you choose to do with the funds afterwards. But you have to have the profitability. You have to have the margin, because you're going to have times where your company runs into a recession like I think we're going into, or maybe even a mild depression. It's going to be tough for a couple of years. And if you were riding the line, when the pandemic hit, and a couple of times since then, I've put money into the company. If I hadn't taken money out when we had a couple good years, I wouldn't have those funds to put in. So that you can do what you want with it, but definitely can't stress enough the importance of having a healthy bottom line.
And just cash reserves. I'll blow my own horn a little bit, I guess. Most of my clients, I push pretty hard to make sure they've got good cash flow management and cash reserves. And when COVID hit, like 3 of them had their best years ever. One had a complete drying up of their business, but because his cash reserves were there, he was able to put them into 2 different business lines that he managed to then salvage and make himself more profitable on the other end. So that kind of like business fundamentals, cash flow management, profitability, all those kinds of things. There's a guy named Shane Parrish. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he runs another interesting podcast called The Knowledge Project. And he talks a lot about positioning, which I've really adopted with a lot of my clients. It's not, people say, oh, did you get lucky or did you not get lucky? And a lot of it is, are you positioning yourself to take advantage of opportunities as they arise, and positioning yourself to be able to withstand blows should they come? And
absolutely.
How do you build your business so that it's positioned for either of those things? And that way it looks like luck, but you were just actually standing in the right place in the road because that was where you needed. No,
100%. And I think, my business right now with that recurring revenue that it has, we might lose a client here or there, but they're $1,000, $2,000, a month contracts. We'd have to lose a significant amount of our clients to have that impact. But you actually kind of just parroted almost something that I've said to my management team, with that group is, this is really an opportunity, grow if we choose to take it, because our competitors are going to be struggling because they haven't put these fundamentals in place, and to a certain extent that benefits our clients. We've got the stability; they don't have to worry that we're going to go away tomorrow. So the opportunity for us is actually there might be some acqui-hires. We started to kind of put some feelers out for that, where if an agency of 2 or 3 people has a decent book of business, but they're just not quite able to make ends meet. We've done a couple acqui-hires, minor acquisitions over the years, and have had some really outstanding results from both. I think their perspective. I mean, one of them's been with us for 10 years, so I think it's that says he's probably pretty happy here. But then we gained some new clients and some new expertise. We wouldn't be able to do that if we didn't have the focus on the recurring revenue piece.
Now, I'd be remiss, just for those who are struggling in their businesses too, to at least not ask you, one of the war stories. You were at a period where you're up over 40 employees, and what happened?
So we had 70% of our business actually came from Disney ABC television, at the time, and it was a great business, great opportunity to work with them. We worked with them for 3 or 4 years, and really, set us up for success both then and now. However, I don't know the full story. My understanding is there might have been a problem with ESPN at the time within the Disney franchise, and the story goes the organization had 20% budget cuts, across the board, and our project fell within that window. So I'd flown out in 2016 in April. I actually went out to go visit our client out there in California, and had a great meeting with them. We talked about the future plans for the project and kind of what we're going to be doing in the roadmap. And then actually had my daughter early May. Part of the reason I went out to California was to make sure everything was fine before I had a baby, and took 3 weeks off to have the baby. Monday I came back to work. Everything's great. Tuesday I got a call from Disney saying they're canceling our contract, and 70% of our revenue. Luckily, there was like a little bit of a trickle down window. It didn't cancel immediately. It was one of those blessing and curses, I guess, as you go through business. One of the reasons we were able to kind of get through purchasing is it was a month-to-month contract, but that also meant that it could be canceled within a month's notice. So I think 3 months to kind of ramp down to half the team, and then another 3 months to go to like a quarter of the team, and then eventually the contract kind of ended. But I think we ended up at the low point of that. We were at 2.5 million, 2.6 million in revenue. I think we went down to our lowest year was 400,000, 500,000. So quite a. They talk about the ups and downs in business. That was a very steep down. That's a reverse hockey stick. Yeah, it was not a great experience. But through that, because we had really core focus on the team and our customers. And that's where kind of, I talked about growth for growth's sake. Disney ABC really didn't fit the model. When I talk about a lot of our businesses, nonprofits and charities, we were able to use and leverage a lot of the excess revenue that we had from that project with Disney to impact in other areas. So it kind of fit the model to a certain extent. But you never want 70% of your business in one basket. We tried to mitigate against that. But as we grew our other basket of business, so did the Disney basket. They kept asking us for more and more, and we kept saying yes and yes. And the margins were good, so it wasn't a bad business decision by any means. But at the same time, it did. Should have probably killed us, honestly. We had amazing support from staff. We had people look at some voluntary pay reductions and things like that. We put in a bonus structure so that if people took a reduction in pay, if we did recover, we would pay them later, and we ended up being able to pay some of the folks back. I think everyone that participated in the program, we paid back the money that they sacrificed during that time. And honestly, a traditional business probably wouldn't have that opportunity to have that discussion with their employees. So full credit goes to that team. It really was a team approach to get out of that mess. I think we went down to maybe 8 or 9 staff, and we're now back up to 15, 16. And we're kind of hovering around that, deciding what we want to be when we grow up. Do we want to be to grow, again? This time it's with, we can impact more people within the nonprofit and charity space, or do we just want to get, really good at what we do and kind of stay the size that we are? And I'll let you know as time goes on where we decide to be.
Well, you've also that led to another opportunity, though, too, as crises often do, right?
Yes.
And so I wanted to shift a little bit. You've got something called RH Ventures or RHA Ventures?
RHA Ventures, yeah. So during that period of time, there ended up being we had actually a world-class office space, and as we had 40 desks. Each desk I think had 2 monitors on it, and it was a premium sort of office space for tech companies, and really started trying to think about, what can I do with this space? And I've always enjoyed working with startups, but decided ultimately that startups don't fit the business model that we have with the agency. So it's kind of sad because I'm like, well, I can't work with startups anymore. And then sort of the nexus of ideas came together. Like, what if we bring startups into the space, and maybe I can coach them, a little bit or help them out with my experience, and ended up meeting with 2 other co-founders, Brian Foster and Joe Dales, who were also kind of looking at the entrepreneurial ecosystem locally. And we really didn't have an accelerator or anything to help out businesses. There really wasn't any sort of venture capital going on in our community here. But yet there's a lot of great tech companies and a lot of great tech startups, coming out of London and this region, Windsor and west, a little bit west of Toronto, obviously Waterloo. So it was kind of like a mismatch. So together we formed something called RH Accelerator that we then that we morphed into now RHA Ventures. Through that process, we ended up raising a $2.5 million investment fund to invest in startups within the region. Have had a lot of success in agriculture and food and agri-food. So now we're raising a $30 million fund to specifically deploy into ag and food and Canadian tech startups here. We'll still have some funds available for non-tech as well. Those will probably be a little bit more regional that we'll invest in. But ultimately, it's really exciting to kind of build what I wish had existed for the entrepreneurial ecosystem here when we got started. A lot of us, in our vintage, there just wasn't a lot of supports for entrepreneurs, except for maybe some mentorship from a few folks, a few institutions. But now we're putting in a framework to make sure that the next generation of founders has better support in our community. And that wouldn't have happened without the space, 30 desks opening up that we could bring in. So we had, 5 or 6 startups, initially working out of that space as well.
And you've talked about how this organization and its funds, you want to sort of change the ethics of that investment venture biz as well, right? In terms of term sheets, control, and things like that.
Yeah, that's a focus of ours. One of the interesting parts about RHA Ventures is we've all run businesses, we've all founded businesses. So we say founders for founders is kind of our core principle, and we believe that the founders are what drives the success in a business. So something that can happen with an investment is you get a $2 million term sheet, and the founders get really excited about the $2 million that's coming to their business, but they don't notice that in the term sheet it might say something like they get to elect 2 out of the 4 board members, or they get to veto the business plan. So what can end up happening is an investment company comes in for 20% of your company, but they basically have veto control over everything, and you can lose control of your company pretty quick. To a certain extent, I understand why the investment companies are doing that, because they're putting other people's money in, and they want to make sure that it's being handled, responsibly. And I think handcuffing the founders and preventing them from doing what they do best is problematic. So we'll go and we'll help renegotiate a term sheet to be fair to both the investors and the founders. It's a little bit of that multi-stakeholder lens. Again, and to me, it's just so intuitive. If you have the founders incentivized, motivated, and you've picked the right founder, which is ultimately our job as investors, then putting a bunch of shackles on them just seems so counterintuitive. You want constraints, exactly what we said earlier. You don't want to give them a $2 million check and say, go spend it on whatever you want. But you want the founders, really motivated and aligned to the business. And, the moment you start peeling away or picking at that trust between investor and founder, the founders spending their time placating the investors and not outselling customers, then now you've got a business that's going to be in decline in my experience. So that edge on, how do we make sure that we're aligning our values and our incentives towards the founders is sort of a key principle of our organization.
I think what you just said there is important for people who are thinking of investors or incubators or all that kind of thing. I've seen a number of times actually in people in incubators or looking for venture financing and things like that. They spend 6-8 months focusing on their deck and their pitches and their investment negotiations that they just lose all their momentum on sales.
Yeah, no, 100%. And we, so again, we're founders for founders. We've all done this. We've all pitched for business, for funds in different capacities. And, any company that comes to us, we say focus on sales, because you're going to get a better valuation for your business when the checks do finally come to, being signed. I say this as an investor. I would rather have a customer than an investor any day. I've been owned by investors, and love them dearly. But ultimately, a customer is easier to deal with, and their cash somehow tastes better. I don't know. It's also like it's positive. It's money coming in versus money that technically in your bank account, but the minute that investment comes in, it's money going back out. So customer dollars, refresh. They bring friends. Hopefully, they bring referrals. In investment, unless you're in, a different series, who got from Series A to Series C, typically it's a bad sign if your investors are having to re-up and put more money in. So that to me, the focus on sales, is number one with our group, because you can have the best idea in the world, but if you don't have customers, it doesn't matter.
Right. Now I should just, maybe we can talk offline. There was just another guest on the podcast, and she runs sort of a mentor incubator program for BIPOC entrepreneurs in the food space. Yep. And so, but they don't do the investment side. They do more like,
we love to definitely connect. And I think, the mentorship piece, too, is really key. One of my favorite stories with the RHA is, a company had built their technology on top of Google's framework, and the Google was supporting it fully, as a paid service and everything. And then one day they just stopped it working. So he had, to his credit, him and his team, spent a week and rebuilt their technology, and were able to kind of redeploy without leveraging Google's tracking tool, as in AdWords and that stuff. But he came up to me at one point in the group and said, I have a question for you. I said, yeah, what's that? He's like, have you ever been so stressed out about what's going on in your business that you've cried? And I honestly, my honest reaction was, well, this week, what do you mean? I don't think this week, and because he said, yeah, I just, last night I was at home, I having dinner, and I just got really stressed out. I almost started crying. I thought, but if you look at, you read books, you read Forbes magazine, you look at Elon Musk on Twitter, it seems like entrepreneurs are just, gifted with always making the right decisions and everything always goes well. And
oh my God.
So it's such an eye-opening experience that this poor entrepreneur was sitting at home feeling that they're somehow like a bad entrepreneur because they're crying. So I'm like, oh no, dude, you should be crying right now. You should be puking. This is because he'd actually just taken a large investment 2 weeks before or something. So right. Now he's looking at the end of his business, plus this money he has to get back and blah blah blah. And I'm just like, no, dude, cry, puke, but
it's
once you're done, get back to your desk and start coding.
Yeah. The role of a mentor, it's what I deal with all the time. I've had clients say I know them better than their spouses do, because the levels of stress that you can't say to your friends, because then you sound like you're failing. You don't want to say to your spouse because they're going to worry about your income. You can't say to your team because they're going to go looking for work. Correct. And so it can be an incredibly lonely experience.
It is.
And you need to be able to have somebody to talk to about those things. And even just, that's why peer groups are great too. You get another bunch of entrepreneurs in a closed room that's confidential, and everybody can go, I'm scared out of my freaking mind. And everybody will totally.
Yeah. No, there's actually, I joined something called the Young Entrepreneurs Association. I would no longer qualify, sadly, but I must have been 27 or so in this group. And, so 3 or 4 years in the business. And
They got rid of the young. It's just called Entrepreneurs Organization.
Okay. Yeah. So then, sitting around a table with other business owners, and the topic of like meeting payroll came up, and everyone at the table was like, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I have to do this. Sometimes I do this. And, sometimes I borrow from my Uncle Ted and blah, 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 blah. And it was really eye-opening for me because I've always struggled with payroll and cash flow and trying to figure it out. Even to this day, it's, our service business, getting customers to pay on time, and employees want to be paid on the regular, which is frustrating, but understandable. And so, trying to match those two things together is just hard. And I remember it being feeling weirdly cathartic, I guess, and that, I'm not the problem. This is just a business problem that, pretty much every founder or business deals with. I don't know, it's very emotionally supportive, I guess, in that way. Because I think there's a different weight that's on your shoulder of like, I'm bad at this versus I'm failing at this. Because failing gives you the opportunity to try new things or new perspectives. But when you think, if you're internalizing that you're bad at it, then there's no way out. So,
now the other part of that, I'd love to hear your take, having worked with some of the others, because there's this might be a piece that others can extract from this podcast to share with others in their lives and even their employees. Because one of the things that I've seen so often with entrepreneurs that isn't the same in the corporate environment, and you've alluded to it a couple of times, is the extent to which there's that stress about running a business, but there's also this real passion to make sure your people are looked after. Like so often, yes, I hear employees think, well, the boss is there just trying to, make money off of me. But I've seen them literally cry and worry and stress about, I can't let these people go. The economy's terrible. They're not going to be able to go get another job. It's my responsibility to help them. And the emotional angst that entrepreneurs carry over the well-being of their employees, that their employees never see, has always been really both impressive and almost sad in a way for me.
It is sad in a way. And even, I've staffed some, they've been with me for 15 years and they'd say, have an amazing trust relationship with. But, sometimes there's that interaction that's like, oh, they're seeing me as the boss right now and not David. And, even, I always have the best intentions of staff at heart. But that can sometimes mean that, an individual is going to have consequences that may not be in their best interest. And it's just unfortunate, what is it? Heavy is the head that wears the crown. I think, unfortunately, and I have a personal bias towards founders versus, what I would call managers and operators. And I'm not being critical or supportive of either group, but my experience is that founders tend to be more on the wanting to build something. And that includes, a great culture for their company. I think over time, I alluded to it at the very beginning, the stresses and the levers, that get pulled on, the advice you get from your accountant, your lawyer, there is almost an intention to enforce that wall between employees and owners. And, sometimes when you make a decision like layoffs, for example, staff are going to be mad at you for making that decision, even though it's the best thing for the business and sometimes the best thing for those that you can retain on the job. But you never, again, been doing this 23 years, that you never get rid of that history of having to, if you had to do layoffs in the past, that weighs on staff's mind, even if they know they've got your best intentions, they know also that you can cut off their employment tomorrow. And that's a dance that, you just have to do, which feeds into the loneliness. I have friends on staff, again, 20 plus years. I consider a lot of the staff my friends, but I also know that, I might have to fire them tomorrow and then they're probably not going to be my friends anymore. I've lost friendships, over that. And it was, it's the right decision for the business. And sometimes it's even the right decision for the employee. But even if it's a layoff, which is, a non-controversial, exiting of employment, let alone firing someone, it's hard. So whereas, other people may, sometimes meet their spouses at work. Generally speaking, it's probably a bad thing if you're the business owner and meeting your spouse at work, right? So there's an island that you're put on. That's where, to your horn, I guess, but I've used business coaches over the years. I recommend therapy, as an alternative as well. Just having somebody else in your corner that can help give you perspective, as a business owner is a really key, I think, part of success. So that be that mentors, be that, paid business coaches, or, therapists, all of which can be amazing tools, in the tool shed because of that fact,
And it's important to know where each of them play well, right? Like I just when you say that, I actually gave hell to a bunch of business coaches once because they were playing in therapy.
Yes,
And
it's a
I was part of the
fine
group,
line.
and I was like, let's not go there. That's not our
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
And we're not trained for that. And you start playing in that space, you can do damage. So I'm very clear. My role as a business coach is to coach the entrepreneur on their business. I frequently encourage them to go get therapy and say, like, that ain't my game. I got to know the limits of my powers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I try to do with my mentorship thing is, I've done it a couple of times in those podcasts, is relay similar experiences that I've had that they, show empathy and show support. But that when you actually get into therapy, what's actually happening in the psyche in those moments, that's, not an area that I would feel comfortable dabbling in.
Yeah. So what's next for our traction?
Really for us, focusing on, kind of what I mentioned earlier is the framework that I like to use sometimes is called the 10x or the 100x model, which is, if you have, I think we have, say, 80 to 100 active clients, right now, what does it look like for us to support 800 or 8,000? If we want to grow our impact and we really want to help nonprofits and charities in this region and ultimately in Canada, what does our business model look like? What do we need to do? What do we need to change? What do we want to be? And it could be just, hey, we're doing exactly what we're doing. We're just going from 20 staff to 40 staff. Or it could be looking at sort of innovative ways of looking at servicing our clients. There's obviously, AI that's, I think, on every business owner's, or should be on every business owner's, a radar for the impacts of their business model. I think it'll be I went through the .com boom and then the Web 2.0 and then the social media. And now I think we're on the fourth major, disruption wave of technology. But at the end of the day, I think we're going to, wake up the same every day and really with our focus on how can we help the sector be better at communicating and leveraging, the skill sets and the talents that are in their organizations and making sure that they have the resources that they need.
Right. So I'm going to do a shortened version, just 2 questions, 2 rapid fire ending questions. What's one personal quality that you most had to improve or overcome to succeed?
For me, it's organization. I have actually ADHD, and I take a mild dose of Vyvanse each day to kind of help mitigate that. People think I'm really organized, but if you saw my email or my Google Calendar, you would be really confused how I could even get information from that because it's so busy. But generally speaking, if you email me, I will get back to you. If it's in my calendar, I'll do it. But if I, don't have my calendar for a day or I don't have my inbox, if my inbox gets overwhelmed, then I lose that system. Then my base nature is chaos. And I think, with I said the mild dose of Vyvanse because I actually think ADHD is kind of a superpower and allows me to do things like task switching and focusing on multiple things at different times, which is great in entrepreneurs. So I don't want to kill it, but I want to be able to hold a thought longer than 5 seconds. So that's kind of why. So that was, that's I have an adapted system that works for me that so I seem organized, but I'm a disaster when it comes to that.
I agree that it's a superpower. It's more like it's like a thoroughbred that just needs to be directed.
Yeah, 100%. Everything I've sort of read points. There's a strong correlation between founders and ADHD, or at least the ability. You have to be able to task switch. You have your accountant talking to you one phone, and then a customer's calling you, in the middle of that call. Then you go back to your account. Some people just can't switch like that, and I think you're going to struggle as an entrepreneur if you don't at least learn task switching if it's not hardwired in.
I agree. And what's one personal quality that most contributed to your success?
I think it really goes down to I'm going to say somewhere around authenticity or integrity piece. In that I think as we built the company to be pro employees, for example, and a good relationship between, quote unquote, ownership and staff, that, as I mentioned, we wouldn't be here if staff hadn't taken a voluntary pay cut at one point in our history. And I don't think that happens without huge trust between management and ownership. And I think the way that trust has been built over the years is just doing what, we said we're going to do and trying our best. Not say that we succeed all the time, not saying that we're, hit all of our goals, all the time, but understanding, what our goals are, what our intentions are. And, we share our weekly numbers with our staff. So they get our weekly revenue numbers, they get our weekly, profit and loss, they get our weekly sales numbers. So, that, I guess, authenticity, transparency, somewhere in there where just, I'll show the numbers to staff and they can see. And what surprised me actually kind of goes back to earlier is a lot of times staff have wanted to see me get paid more. That's been an issue that they've raised, that, I should be earning more for the work that I'm doing or for the business, which frankly shocked me because of that earlier thing where, that there's an adversarial relationship between boss and employees. But I think at the end of the day, if employees really like the business and like what they're doing, they want to see the owners do well.
Yeah, because it's good for everybody. And sometimes it's just an ethic too. I've been in the same position where I've had clients where their team has actually said, the boss isn't making enough. Like, this isn't fair. And people do have an innate sense of fairness when they are treated fairly.
Absolutely. And that's been key. So again, by being transparent and just being authentic with what we do and what we try to do, I think that's built that trust up over years.
Nice. So where can people find you?
www.rtraction.com, or
that's
I'm on
the letter
LinkedIn.
R and traction, right?
Yeah, the word traction. Yeah. And then LinkedIn, David Billson. Happy to connect with any folks who want to talk either on the RHA front for if you got food and agribusiness looking for investment, or if you want to invest in that space, come talk to me. And nonprofit charities or people wanting to work with folks in that space, we're not currently hiring, but frequently are. So reach out for that too.
Yep. And if you are a board member or something of a nonprofit and looking for some help, Dave's your guy. Yeah.
Even if you're, this is why this podcast is great, because a lot of business owners sit on boards of charities. So if your organization needs help, feel free to give us a call. Because of that multi-stakeholder thing, one thing we're really good at is saying we can't help you, but here's someone who can.
Right on. Well, thanks very much for your time. I've really enjoyed the chat.
Warren. Appreciate it.